My lords, ladies and gentlemen, as chairman of the Adam Smith Institute, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all this evening to the inaugural Salah Kamal lecture. This new lecture series, named in honor of Salah Kamal, the entrepreneur, philanthropist, media expert, and father of modern Islamic finance. It was he who founded the Al-Baraka International Bank and the NBC Media Corporation, which did so much to modernize the Middle Eastern region. Today, the Adam Smith Institute has also published its own short paper, Seizing the Initiative, the UK's Islamic Finance Opportunity. Worldwide, Islamic finance assets are set to exceed over $6.7 trillion. And in the UK is widely recognized as the Islamic finance hub of the Western world, having been the first country outside of the Islamic world to offer the sovereign sukuk. Our research recommends that the UK establish itself as a key exporter of Islamic finance. Before we hear from our keynote speaker, the Right Honourable Nadhim Zahawi MP, we will be hearing from those who knew Salah Kamal personally in order to gain a better insight into his life and his achievements, including his own son. I cannot think of a more appropriate person to kick off tonight's proceedings than our first speaker, who now chairs the Board of Trustees of the Salah Kamal Humanitarian Foundation, alongside his work with a number of other companies and boards. My lords, ladies, and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Abdullah Kamal.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Distinguished guests, honorable lords, and member of the House of Commons. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is with my great pleasure that I welcome you to the inaugural Salah Kamal Lectures, a significant event commemorating the legacy of a visionary leader in the world of economics and commerce, a man whom I'm privileged to call my father. This evening, we have gathered not only to pay tribute to his extraordinary legacy, but also to embark on a journey of enlightenment and intellectual. In a partnership with the Adam Smith Institute, ASI, the institute, well known as one of the world's foremost think tanks, has been instrumental in shaping political opinion and advocating for free markets, with aspiration of eradicating poverty, a cause that would have a lot of meaning to my father. But of course, this evening is first and foremost a special evening for me and my family. And I'm delighted that my mother, Maida Nazar, which I owe very much, is here. She's a long-time companion of my father and a true friend. It is also an honor that the Right Honourable Nadhim Zahawi MP has agreed to deliver the inaugural lecture. In a short while, we await his insight on the future of Saudi Arabia. Nadhim's own story, having arrived in the UK as an immigrant and risen to the highest levels of government alongside a distinguished entrepreneur career, is a testament of his remarkable success. I extend a warm welcome to him on this important occasion. Before we begin the lecture, I wish to share a few reflections of my own. I stand before you with a profound pride as the son of Saleh Kamel, a man whose unbeatable spirit, unwavering commitment have left an enduring imprint on the worlds of economics, commerce, and banking. Pioneering Islamic banking, my father broke the conventional boundaries of business, embodying a visionary outlook, harnessing the potential for innovation and progress rooted in the principles of Islamic finance. He was the chairman of the Islamic Chamber of Commerce and Development, the ICCD, having earlier established Al Barakah Symposium for Islamic Economy in 1981. Through his groundbreaking initiatives, my father led the groundwork for global movement, advocating for financial inclusivity, ethical investment, and sustainable growth. Through his lifetime, he remained steadfast in his belief that progress should not come at the expense of ethical integrity within society. As he said, wealth must not merely serve individual advancement, but must act as a catalyst for achieving equilibrium and harmony within communities. I take pride in following in my father's footsteps, recently becoming the chairman of the ICCD, where I drew inspiration from his grand vision of this and his members of collaborating around the world in both businesses and investment. The ICCD aims to enhance and implement this vision through transforming the Islamic Chamber into the leading organization supporting Muslim business communities globally, expanding its reach through regional offices with a strategic plan to reach in Istanbul and Jeddah, with a strategic plan to reach eventually worldwide. We are institutionalizing this transformation through a network of independent centers, serving the private sector across the globe. These centers include the Research and Information Center, the Arbitration Center, in addition, in working on two important new centers, which we hope to launch before the end of this year. Firstly, Saleh Kamel Entrepreneurship Center, and secondly, the Women Empowerment Center, which I am delighted to name after my beloved mother. Furthermore, I am committed to enhancing the impact of Al Barakah Symposium for Islamic economy, transforming it from an annual event in Saudi Arabia to a year-long global platform in major cities, from London to Jakarta, Istanbul, and on to Kuala Lumpur. We have also initiated the Saleh Kamel Award for Islamic Economy, the most important award in the world of economics, in Islamic economics. Through these endeavors and others, we strive to realize my father's vision of elevating the holiest city of Islam, Mecca and Medina, into a global financial hub. Indeed, under the leadership of the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdul Aziz and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia has emerged as a shining light of innovation and investment on the global stage, from pioneering infrastructure project to cutting-edge technological advancement. Our nation continues to set an exemplary standard, propelling progress and prosperity on an international scale. I invite each of you present tonight, as well as those turning into remotely, to immerse yourself in the modern Saudi Arabia. Visit our beautiful country, meet our remarkable population, and seize the opportunities that unfold as we endeavor to realize the 2030 vision articulated by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia stands open and ready for business. Amongst my most cherished accomplishment in recent memories is the establishment of the Saleh Kamel Humanitarian Foundation. At its core, the foundation is committed to addressing pressing issues in society and nurturing sustainable development across diverse communities by challenging resources and expertise toward empowering communities and advancing social welfare. The foundation embodies a profound commitment to creating a better society wherever it may be. This evening, let us reflect upon the cherished values that Saleh Kamel held dear and the enduring legacy has left us, and of course, to my beloved family. Let us reaffirm our dedication to fostering a world where compassion, innovation, and a collaborative spirit reign supreme. May the proceeding of this evening serve as a guiding light of enlightenment and inspiration, steering us toward a future characterized by prosperity and progress for all. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Our next speaker, Alison, began working as Salah Kamal's personal assistant in 1981. And over the years, she has worked in many of the group's companies while continuing to be a personal support to the family. In 2016, she went on to set up her own company where she provides similar services to various clients. Could you please welcome to the stage Alison Dodds?
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I'm sure there will be people tonight in the room and many in other countries who can give testimony to the extraordinary vision and business achievements of Sheikh Saleh. But I'd like to say a little bit about the man himself, who I knew personally. When I started working for him in 1981, little did I know I would be with him some 39 years later. From the moment I met him, it was clear he was unlike anyone I had worked for. He had a presence, an aura about him. It was very difficult to pinpoint exactly what it was, but when he walked into a room, everyone fell silent. At our first meeting, we had a very frank conversation about principles and what motivated us. I said trust and honesty were very important to me. I learnt very quickly he was a modest and humble man, and there was a common narrative running through all his business ideas and vision, a deep desire to improve the lives of others less fortunate than himself. Sheikh Saleh was driven by his beliefs, always open to new opportunities, always unafraid of failure. Challenges were something he relished, and he was not afraid of hard work. The word impossible was not in his vocabulary. His love of family, his care, compassion, and generosity, along with a great sense of humor, were evident in all he did. He enjoyed nothing more than being with his family, watching his children and their children growing up. Often working late when he was in the office in London, reading through a huge pile of papers he inevitably brought with him, he would talk about his ideas for the next project or simply about life in general, whilst never forgetting to ask about my family. His visits to London were always prompted by the same question. And how long have we been working together again, Alison? And before I had a chance to work it out, his eyes would twinkle and he would reply, longer than you've been married to either of your husbands. That sense of humor was never far from the surface. I felt there was a mutual respect and loyalty between us, which is why I think our working relationship endured so many years. During the COVID lockdown in March 2020, he phoned me. What can I do for you? I asked. Oh, nothing, he replied, which was very unusual. I just wanted to check that you and your family were all well during this difficult time. So typical of his care for others. We talked for a few minutes, and then he ended by saying he was looking forward to meeting my new twin granddaughters who had recently been born on his next visit to London. I didn't know at the time, but I understand he made many such calls to old colleagues and friends. It was the last time we spoke. When I took that call, I remember exactly where I was and exactly every word of the conversation. And it's strange how this happens in important events in your life. And that was one of them. I have no doubt Sheikh Saleh's extraordinary legacy will live on through his family and through the work of the foundation that bears his name. He was an exceptional man, a one-off, and it's been a privilege to work with him and the family. My life has been greatly enriched by the experience.
Our next speaker this evening, Iqbal Khan, is the founding board member and CEO of Faj Capital, an Islamic investment firm focused on the Middle East and Southeast Asia. He is also member of the board of directors of Kravia Group, Jadwa Investment, and MENA Infrastructure. Please welcome to the stage Iqbal Khan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I want to pick up where Alison left Sheikh Saleh Kamil's bit. When my third daughter was born, my wife, who's here, named her Baraka. Immediately, I got a call from Sheikh Saleh Kamil. Don't forget to dedicate some royalty to the original Al-Baraka group. I said, Sheikh Saleh, I will do that, but you should not forget Ayman, who was the companion of the Prophet. And she was known as the original Lady Baraka. So we settled that we will both contribute to some good causes together. I feel very, very privileged, and I'm very grateful to the Saleh Kamil family for giving me this opportunity to publicly state how much we owe to that great man. Every country, every community, every family reveal their identity by the people they produce, but more importantly, by the people they remember. When we have a sense of history, we do not go down in morality. I've had the great privilege to work with Sheikh Saleh Kamil, and 5 minutes I was telling Akh Abdullah is not a time which I can do justice, but 3 distinct memories. One, going back to 1994, I was in my younger years in Islamic banking and finance, and there was a conference in Bahrain in which finance ministers of about 30 or so Muslim countries were all assembled. And the conference was, should we create stock markets which are dedicated for Islamic financial instruments and scripts? And I remember one night before visiting Sheikh Saleh Kamil in the Regency Intercontinental in Bahrain, and I said, Sheikh Saleh, this will be a disaster. Because if we create a separate stock market, then the industry will go backward. So we discussed this, and it was very political because at that time, pan-Arab nationalism was at its peak. So Sheikh Saleh Kamil said, okay, so you say these things in the meeting, and I have discussed this with Prince Muhammad Al Faisal and himself, and we will support it. And the support was that, Islam, when it came, it continued with the good practices of the past. All the months of the holy calendar, Ramadan, Shaban, Shawwal, were all part of the Ayyam al-Jahiliyyah, the days pre-Islam. And therefore, it was very important to make sure that we did not go and divide the stock markets. That monumental decision, which was attributable to Sheikh Saleh Kamil's wisdom, and he convinced Prince Muhammad Al Faisal Al Saud to support that, was, in my view, a very distinctive decision which led to Islamic finance getting mainstream relevance, which was talked about that it's an industry which has grown so far. Fast forward 2003, after 9/11, Dubai is holding the IMF meetings and World Bank meetings. And there was a meeting which Treasury Secretary John Snow at that time and his cabinet called, in which by invitation the Governor of Central Bank, Sultan Nasir al-Suwaidi, Governor Zaiti from Malaysia, Sheikh Saleh Kamil, the President of IDB, and myself, we were invited to a closed-door meeting. And in that meeting, Sheikh Saleh Kamil said something which was that if 9/11 has proved anything, we need more of Islamic finance. If 9/11 has proved anything, we need to give mainstream relevance to Islamic finance so Muslim minorities living in Britain can own homes, own businesses without compromising their faith. And in the process, they become more British and more Muslim. That is a word which I have always carried it with me. When I was running HSBC Amana and launching home financing, business financing products in UK and in America, we always took Sheikh Saleh Kamil's very futuristic words. And I want to move on to 2012, when I had the great privilege of getting the Royal Award for Islamic Finance. In my acceptance speech, for me, the greatest honor was this, that the first recipient of that award was no one else except my mentor, my teacher, and my role model, Sheikh Saleh Kamil Rahmatullah Alayh. And I said, we grow in the image of those whom we respect, those whom we admire, and those whom we love. And I always respected him, admired him, and loved him dearly. And he was very, very kind to me. He always teased me about naming my daughter Baraka. He said, make sure that no more ventures are called with Baraka's name. So I said, that you have to convince my wife. So Sheikh Saleh Kamil had a big impact. There was a word which he always said, yanfa'un nas. The Quran in Surah Ar-Ra'd said that which is good for mankind. His definition of Islamic finance was that you can do everything and anything which is good for mankind. Yanfa'un nas. That is the definition of Islamic finance. If anything is good for the environment, if anything is good for humanity, that is allowed in Islamic finance. That was his faith, that was his belief, and that was his practice. And thank you very much for listening to me. I can continue for the next couple of hours, but I think we have a very important guest who's going to speak after this, and you have all turned up to listen to him and not to me. Thank you very much.
I think certainly three very moving and fitting tributes to Saleh Kamil, and not only reflecting on his contribution to business and society, but that he was fundamentally a good man. Our next speaker will be giving the keynote of the evening on the future of Saudi Arabia. He is a man in little need of introduction because he was in the papers most of the weekend. But for those of you who don't know who he is, the Right Honourable Nadeem Zahawi, MP, has held many of the highest offices of state. He was briefly my boss as a special advisor to the government. But I think perhaps the highest office he has reached is as patron of the Adam Smith Institute. And so it is my great pleasure to welcome Nadeem to the stage. Everyone, give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much, James. My friend, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to this fabulous event here at the Dorchester. Welcome as well to all those of you for whom this is... Oh my God. Forgive me. Welcome as well to all of you to whom this is your first interaction with the new and improved Adam Smith Institute
2.0. Under the steady command of our chairman, my old special advisor, as you've heard, James Lawson, the team especially, of course, the brilliant Mimi for organising tonight should be thanked for putting on what is surely one of the most impressive events a British think tank has hosted for many years, and that's just as well, because we are here to discuss an incredibly important topic, and a topic that was spearheaded by a very important man, in whose, of course, honour we all come together tonight. Fundamentally, economics is the study of people as much as it is the study of anything else. I spent 10 years of my life making a living studying human behaviour. At YouGov, the British unicorn I was proud to lead for a decade, we studied the best and the worst of people. But I don't need that experience to appreciate the very human desire for a son to want to commemorate the life and legacy of an extraordinary father. We have just heard what a wonderful and impressive man Sheikh Saleh was. Of course, Sheikh Abdullah Saleh Al-Kamil, you do your father proud this evening. Shukran. The ASI exists alongside its work as a think tank and, of course, as an educational charity. And it has been one of the joys of my post-government life to be able to reconnect with the intellectual side of the world of politics, from economics and, of course, public policy to philosophy and even history. No practitioner of politics, my friends, can neglect the intellectual world for long, and it's still hope to be successful. As a chemical engineer, by my initial training, and of course, as a real salesman at heart, I can thoroughly recommend the brain boxes at the Adam Smith Institute for the sheer breadth and depth of their knowledge. When I was asked to give this inaugural keynote speech on Islamic finance, I went right back to the start, even before the revelation of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The people living on the Arabian Peninsula were no slouches. The Himayra people, with their ancient city, Qaryat al-Faw, had extensive markets and operated trade routes for hundreds of years. Their position, sandwiched between Rome to the west and Persia to the east, allowed them to sit between the two superpowers of their day. They took advantage of the monsoon winds for seaborne trade with India, though seaborne trade was gradually supplanted by trade by land. When Roman trade in the Red Sea and Indian Ocean boomed after the incorporation of Egypt into the empire by the Emperor Augustus, but even the mighty Caesar Augustus failed in his attempt to conquest of Arabia. Led by Gallus between 26 and 25 BC, a fateful moment, as nearly 700 years later, forces would march in the opposite direction. Those armies were, of course, led by a man whom, in the word of my friend Lord Hannon of King's Clear, was the only businessman to also found a major religion. I mean, of course, Islam, with the civilizational scope and encompassing not just the sphere of religion, but also law, society, and even economics. As our excellent ASI paper released today says, the provision of Sharia-compliant financial services is at once relatively young and relatively old. According to some historians, the elimination of interest in early Islam culminated in a fully fledged Islamic economic system under Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Khalifa al-Rashidun. An early form of market economy emerged, of course, under the early Islamic caliphates, with millions of people across vast swathes of territory tied together by a single legal system and a single widely circulated currency, the gold dinar. Muslim traders are even known to have used checks, sak, since the time of the Abbasid Caliphate. Now, many of you will know that it has become very fashionable to ascribe the inventions of things long considered British to other people and other times. Football is now apparently a Chinese invention. And every year, tiresome pseudo-historians on Twitter point out that England's patron saint, St. George, was not even English. Of course, as those of you who heard my attempt in Parliament to make St. George's Day a bank holiday will know that I know that St. George was, like me, actually Kurdish. And I am afraid today that I have another blow to inflict on British intellectual pride. The man whose name the ASI operates under, the great Adam Smith, has long been considered here in the West as the father of modern economics. But, my friends, he was actually beaten by some half a millennium to this title by the great Andalusian Arabic scholar Abdurrahman ibn Khaldun, who lived and wrote in the latter half of the 1300s. Khaldunian thinking identified the division of labor as the basis for any civilized society. And let me quote Ibn Khaldun: "Thus he cannot do without a combination of many powers from among his fellow beings if he is to obtain food for himself and for them. Through cooperation, the needs of a number of persons many times greater than their own number can be satisfied." Instead of the example of the pin factory, Khaldun talked about the use of carvings for doors and chairs. So you have him to thank, quite literally, for where you sit this evening. Concepts like the Laffer curve, the idea that financial markets can help regulate themselves, and even the idea that big government hurts economic development, can all be found in his writings. Thankfully, our man, Adam Smith, was gracious enough to acknowledge in his essays on the history of astronomy the intellectual advances of the Islamic world. He wrote, "The empire of the caliphs seems to have been the first state under which the world enjoyed that degree of tranquility which the cultivation of the sciences requires. It was under the protection of those generous and magnificent princes that the ancient philosophy and astronomy of the Greeks were restored and established in the East. That tranquility which their mild, just, and religious government diffused over their vast empire revived that curiosity of mankind to inquire into the connecting principles of nature." And in defense of Smith, so the team don't disown me completely, he was the first to comprehensively pull all the concepts together to produce economics as we know it today. And by this day, it was the West that was driving all of the interesting intellectual developments. Christopher de Bellaigue, excellent recent work, The Islamic Enlightenment, bridges the gap between the world of the early caliphs and the medieval thinkers through to the modernizations that have brought us here today. These Islamic modernists attempted to reconcile Islam with modern developments in financial services. This included, of course, a reconsideration of the prohibition on interest in light of economic orthodoxy, which held that interest rates and insurance were among the preconditions for productive investment needed to stimulate growth in a modern economy. Sir Saeed Kamal Khan, one of the leading lights of the 19th century Aligarh movement amongst Muslim in British India argued for a distinction between riba and the legitimate non-riba interests, such as in cases of commercial lending. As an aside, even my own great uncle, Jamil Sidqi al-Zahawi, played a part in this modernization in his own way. The son of the Mufti of Baghdad, Uncle Jamil held numerous government positions under the British Mandate and was variously editor of the only serious newspaper in Baghdad, Al-Zawra, and a professor of law at Baghdad University. A controversial topic was women's emancipation, exhorting women to give up the veil. A cause close to his heart was the subject of many of his poems and writings, of course. Trailblazers like him and, of course, Sheikh Saleh are the hows and whys in how the modern Middle East is now moving in the direction of progress and development that it is today, and none better than the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Gone are the desert qasair, or castles, of which the Umayyad caliphs were so fond. In comes the line and the Neom project. Fun fact to link ASI with these developments is, of course, Director of Research, Maxwell Marler's father, has worked on those projects and has also contributed to the Future Markets Policy Unit in the past. See, I'm always keeping tabs on my team at the ASI. In 1975, the Jeddah-based Islamic Development Bank was established with a mission to support bankable projects in OIC member countries, and the first modern commercial Islamic bank, the Dubai Islamic Bank, was established in 1979. It took the United Kingdom hundreds of years to go from Magna Carta to the kinds of social equality that we all enjoy here today. It looks to me, my friends, that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will get there very, very quickly. And that will be in no small part thanks to the work of Sheikh Saleh, about whom we have heard such wonderful stories tonight. Much like the Sheikh, I am a firm believer in capitalism and free markets. They stand as some of our most impressive achievements as a species, despite the naysayers. Despite the naysayers, they are intensely moral, my friends, creative and human in their invention. They allow us the opportunity to fulfill our God-given potential and, of course, to create enough surplus to help our fellow man at the same time. No other system has ever come close to that. It is these tools that we need to advance the prosperity agenda that will, I hope, help bring an end to the suffering in Palestine, in the West Bank, in Israel, and of course, most importantly, in Gaza. In a world where both sides can work together in harmony and prosperity. The Abraham Accords, too, were such powerful steps, and we shouldn't let malign actors get in the way of it. As the French free market philosopher Frédéric Bastiat said, when goods do not cross borders, soldiers will. Winston Churchill, of course, put it in his own inimical Anglo-Saxon way. Jaw is better than war. Today, Islamic finance is an integral part of the global financial ecosystem. The global Islamic finance industry is expected to maintain high single-digit growth in 24-25 after a growth of 8% in 2023. Islamic finance is one of the fastest growing segments of the global financial system, with an estimated compound annual rate of 17% since 2009. The assets of the world's Islamic banks expanded rapidly to reach 3.24 trillion by the end of 22, up from 1.3 trillion in 2012, a decade earlier. The number of fully fledged Islamic banks was reported by the London Stock Exchange as 336 in 2022, while the number of conventional banks, and the point was powerfully made that it should be part of the main global financial system. The number of conventional banks offering Islamic banking services was reported at 274, in addition to the 336. The strongest growth in Islamic finance over the past decade has been in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and in Iran. However, over the past decade, the number of countries engaged in creating or enabling infrastructure for Islamic finance has increased. In 2023, Bank Niswa launched the first Sharia-compliant financial offering for retail customers in the Sultanate of Oman. Turkey has offered Sukuk certificates since 2012, with Islamic finance now regarded as strategically important by the Turkish government. Similar interest in Islamic finance has emerged in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan, in Nigeria, Uganda, and of course the Philippines. Now, I have referred to our paper tonight a few times, and I want to quote some of it to you. Clearly, Islamic finance represents a significant part of our global financial ecosystem, but what does that have to do with the United Kingdom? The UK is already globally recognized as the Islamic finance hub of the Western world, according to 2023's analysis by Fitch Ratings. The strength of the United Kingdom, the London Stock Exchange, as a key international Sukuk listing venue, its sizable Islamic fund segment, and its capable human capital people, including its professional legal services, which cater to Islamic finance globally. In a post-Brexit world, my friends, policymakers must seize on the growth opportunities presented by increased services, trade with markets in Asia and Africa, and Islamic finance is a key to that puzzle. Get it right, and the global growth of Islamic finance has the potential to deliver enormous benefits to the United Kingdom, hopefully powering growth in the financial service sector and helping the City of London retain its place as centre of global finance. Making the most of this opportunity will mean crafting a regulatory framework that enables Islamic finance institutions to start and, of course, to grow here in our country. It will also mean ensuring that London builds and maintains a credible pool of human capital. For the foreseeable future, demand for Islamic finance in the UK will, of course, be largely driven by international consumers. As such, any regulatory reform in this area should aim to maximize potential export upside, carrying on in the proud British tradition of exporting high-quality financial services around the world. With about 1.9 billion Muslims in the world today, the demand for Islamic finance is plain to see, my friends. It stands to reason that London should step up and deliver the supply. And it would be remiss of me, of course, to ignore the fact that much of the financing for the restoration and the renewal of what will still be my office for the next few months, the Houses of Parliament, will be raised through a sukuk. The ASI's paper also explains to the layman some of the reasoning behind Islamic finance. Sharia prohibits riba, or usury, which generally defined as interest paid on all loans of money. Much of the literature on the theory of Islamic banking has grown out of concern as to how the monetary and banking system would function if interests were abolished. In general, Islamic financial institutions deal with this prohibition through some form of profit and loss sharing mechanism. These, of course, prohibitions tend to rule out investments in derivatives, options, and futures. Instead, many Islamic finance institutions offer sukuk or Sharia-compliant bonds. Sukuk holders are given nominal part ownership of an asset from which they receive an income either from profit generated by that asset or from rental payments made by the issuer. Unlike traditional forms of investment, sukuk is regarded as permissible for Muslims. Sukuk bonds are structured to comply with Sharia by paying profit rather than interest. Islamic jurisprudence also traditionally makes prescriptions about the proper functioning of markets. So hoarding, speculation, and collusion amongst producers and traders against the interests of the consumer, and such monopolies that are injurious to the social economic health of society are all ruled out. Pretty visionary, I would say, my friends. And of course, zakat is a mandatory charitable contribution, customarily calculated at 2.5% of a Muslim's savings and wealth. All this is, I think, incredibly important for us to focus on here in the UK. Now, why should the UK be leading and be the home for Islamic finance? For one, the UK enjoys a global reputation for financial services as a hub that continues to grow, and it maintains close links with many of the economies powering the global Islamic finance industry. English common law status as a globally recognized instrument for dispute resolution also plays a major part in this. And of course, according again back to Fish Ratings, the UK has also benefited from active efforts to incubate Sharia-compliant financial infrastructure, and the government's promotion of the role of London, the London Stock Exchange, as a key international sukuk listing venue, with over $50 billion outstanding as of the first quarter of 2023. I won't go on and list all the advantages of why you should invest in the UK, but what I would say to you is that there are lots of Muslims in the United Kingdom now, and the majority of them share the same beliefs as Christians, as Jews, Hindus, secular Brits, and everyone else. They love their families and they love their country. They want to worship their God and make a better life for their descendants. As Adam Smith observed in the theory of moral sentiment, man desires not just to be loved, but to be lovely. Nevertheless, there are a vocal minority who want something else, and we all have a responsibility in not letting those crowd out the millions and millions of moderate voices around the world. And the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, along, of course, with the United Arab Emirates and those others who signed up to the Abraham Accords and more, are showing how this can be done. As recent events have shown, the poor people suffering under theocratic fascist regimes also want the same thing. So we in Britain shouldn't be weak on this issue at a time when so much of the Muslim world is turning its back, led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, rightly so, in these dangerous ways of thinking. The UK and the West should be embracing these modernizations and welcoming these people with deep business and cultural partnership, especially as Vladimir Putin, the Chinese Communist Party, have moved in precisely the wrong direction. We must realize that if the historian Niall Ferguson is right, and we are in something approaching Cold War II between the West and the authoritarian regimes that I have just mentioned, then we need to be deepening alliances and promoting our values widely rather than retreating into immiseration and decline. It is important for people like me to say these things, but this is not a lecture on such issues, my friends. It is a lecture on the wealth of nations and how prosperity is not a zero-sum game. How brave men, armed with ideas, can generate and spread wealth for the betterment of a people and of a world. And finally, it is an evening about one man. One man's love and respect for his father. If my boys, Sheikh Abdullah, or my darling little Mia, were one day to set up a lecture series in my name, I would be touched beyond words. My friend, you have done your father proud. May this be the beginning of many, many years of fruitful collaboration. Thank you very much indeed.
We've got time for a little bit of Q&A, but if you'll bear with us, in the background behind me, like magic, chairs should appear. While that happens, if I could ask Abdullah, Nadeem, and also the authors of the book on Once Upon a Time in Mecca to come up to the stage and join me, we can kick off the final parts of the evening. So our two extra guests, just very quickly as they come, we're joined by Sir William and Pat Lancaster, who wrote the book that you will all be entitled to a copy of on the way out. If I could see hands for anyone who has any questions, and I'll go around the room. We've got time for a few. We're running a little bit behind schedule, so I might not be quite as polite or honourable as the man whose name this series is named after, and a little bit more abrupt. Any questions from the floor? Aidan, I think the microphones are coming around.
Thank you very much. A question for William Patey. As someone who knew Sheikh Saleh Kamal extremely well, I just wondered if there were any lessons in life you think he would like the audience tonight to take away with them.
Well, I think the biggest lesson I learned from Sheikh Saleh, I didn't really understand what the essence of an Islamic economy was. And I'm not a big fan of unrestrained capitalism, which I'll freely admit to, because I think unrestrained capitalism can lead to quite derogatory and difficult situations. So Adam Smith's not my natural home. What I loved about Sheikh Saleh was that, and what I took away from him was that he wasn't interested in just making profit. He was a businessman and he wanted to make a profit, but he always asked a supplementary question. And that's why I admired the man so much. The supplementary question was, okay, I could make money, but what does this do for society? Does this venture benefit society? Will it help the town in which it operates? Will it help groups of people? And that was his criteria. Simply making money didn't interest him. And I think that's a great philosophy. And it's something I didn't know about him when I met him in Saudi Arabia. I only discovered it as we studied him and interviewed people, and he was a man of great vision, and that's the bit I take away from him. Profit, okay, you can't do anything without profit, but if profit alone, it's not worth doing. I'll move on and I'll do something else. That's the measure of the man. He'd be welcome in the Labour Party.
And Iqbal, if you might join us on the stage as well. I think the fifth seat was for you, while Nadeem ponders on a response.
I'll let you get away with that one. But all I was going to say, actually, if you think about everything Sheikh Saleh stood for, it is about responsible capitalism. And I think, actually, that fits incredibly well with the Adam Smith Institute.
I think Sheikh Saleh's economic policy can be summarized: capitalism with a moral perspective. We often talked about his philosophy of investment, and he always said, every time I make an investment, I ask myself this question, the philosophy of better ownership. How can I be a better owner? And then he said, after I made the investment and is doing well, I ask myself, am I being a better owner? And I think that philosophy of better ownership summed up his economic thesis, in my view.
So next, I spotted Sam at the back.
Thank you very much, James. Sam Bidwell, ASI, and one of the paper authors. I wanted to ask the panel, principally the question to you, Mr. Khan, about how the UK can seize, put a few recommendations in the paper, but how the UK can fully seize the Islamic finance opportunity. What steps, what infrastructure do we need to put in place in order to fully make the most of that opportunity? And what recommendations can you make from your years of expertise in this space?
I think I'll again repeat what Sheikh Saleh used to say, that Britain has played a very important role in creating an infrastructure for Islamic finance. And I think on this, both the parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, have come together to create the economic framework. And the key thesis is Britain sits on the gateway to world trade and commerce. And it is what can Islamic investors do to make British trade, commerce, and investments more valuable? And what can Islamic finance do for British exporters? For example, ECGD was the first export credit agency in the world to come up with a Sharia-compliant facility in order to help British companies. But I don't think that the British successive governments had not promoted it the way they should have. So I think Britain should play a much more proactive role in also using the authentic power of the Muslim community in this country. And this was in display when we were bidding for the Olympics. At that time, the government said to the Muslim Council of Britain that you must call up the Muslim countries to vote for Britain to have Olympics. So I think using the community as a source of strength and bringing the communities together, so that would be my response to that question.
Take a couple more. Lots of people have been trying to catch my eye, so to manage expectations, we're probably only going to take one or two more. But what I'd encourage you to do is, after this section, the speakers will still be around for a little bit. Feel free to approach them and ask your questions, particularly the sort of Westminster political hacks. If you want to grab Nadeem, I'm sure he'll spare a minute. I'm deliberately going around a bit more. I spotted Adele Darwish on the front row here, long-running author and many books and articles on the region. Might be a good one to go to next.
Well, thank you very much. I sort of involved in the project, and I'm surprised in Nazim Zahawi didn't mention his most famous constituent, William Shakespeare, who voted for him, as in his inaugural speech. But we've been talking about economics quite a lot, but there's two words. I think William touched upon a word that came new now in the last few weeks, which is corporate responsibility. But long before that phrase was coined, Sheikh Saleh was showing that. But perhaps I'm going to invite two people, maybe Sheikh Abdullah and Pat, because we were talking about the economics and about investment, but I want to talk about two things really. His understanding of the media, which I have personal experience with that, and his contribution, and the human touch, which Pat actually touched upon when she spoke to his family, and his wives and his daughters and so on. So perhaps Sheikh Abdullah can tell us a bit more about what he learned from him in the actual family atmosphere, and perhaps Pat can tell us more about the human and the journalistic awareness side of it. Thank you.
I think one of the most important thing, also, sorry, I ought to say that we're launching the book on Sheikh Saleh tonight, and I wouldn't like that to be lost in the whole thing that's going on, because it's a book that I very much enjoyed working on, and I think it shows more about the person that he actually was. Alison's told us some things about the man he was, but I cannot tell you what an experience it was to go and meet his friends and his family and people, actually the people who worked with him and for him. I think that, and he was no longer with us, sadly, I never met him. I think it's very easy if somebody has something to gain for them to speak well of a person. Everybody spoke well of Sheikh Saleh, and that couldn't benefit them at all. He was obviously an exceptional human being. And I wouldn't like that to be lost in the whole hurly-burly of a series of lectures, because we are celebrating a man who was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And I think that's more important, really, than British economics or anything else. Yes, let's pursue that.
I think Pat summed it all, so I'll save the question for somebody else now.
Would anyone else like to contribute on that one? Or? So we'll have copies of the book available later in the Holford room. I'll take maybe one more in the interest of time, and there will be opportunity for further refreshments and networking. I spotted Maxwell at the very back.
Hello, hi. Maxwell Marlowe, Director of Research at the Adam Smith Institute and a co-author report as well. A question for the panel. Could you elucidate a little bit more on how the city could really capitalise on the promise that Islamic finance gives Britain and the rest of the world?
Thank you, Maxwell. So look, I think you've heard it tonight. In many ways, the opportunity is to raise the profile. Why? Because it makes business sense, and if we are to sort of return to the basic values of Sheikh Saleh, it also makes sense for those communities that it will serve, right? So it is absolutely, it speaks to his values, but also, I think, to our values in Britain. The ability to be seen to lead the world in Islamic financial products can only be a good thing, both for our communities in the United Kingdom, because if people, and I think your earlier remarks, sir, when he talked about what Sheikh Saleh said, that let people own homes, let them own businesses, then they will be much more proud to be British, is, I think, a great way for us to enjoy the legacy of a great man. And I think, actually, in many ways, our city's minister, who I know is very much wanting to engage in growing the pie in the United Kingdom, would see this immediately. And I think beyond today's event, we ought to begin to think about how we make that link with Sheikh Abdullah and the rest of the team. Because clearly, they are, everyone I asked, by the way, before I met this great man, said to me about his father. He literally is the father of Islamic finance in the world.
So I've been corrected, and we have time for one more. And Kaylee caught my eye next. So I think we'll squeeze her in and see how we're doing for time from there.
Hello, Callie from ELAF Media. My question's for everybody. How do you see artificial intelligence impacting the economy and the workforce in Saudi Arabia in the next decade?
So Saudi Arabia is embracing the new technology in whether it is robotics or AI in every aspect. So Saudi Arabia's economy is going through a massive transformation today. 70% of the economy still is cash. So we think now with digitalization, 70% will become digital and 30% still will be cash. But in terms of the role of analytics and e-government, there Saudi Arabia is moving at a speed of light. And the total embrace in every ministry, every government, and AI will shape the way business is done. And Saudi Arabia realizes that today, not only Saudi Arabia, but rest of the world, we have an opportunity to leapfrog and go from a agricultural / mineral-based economy to a knowledge economy. So today you see Saudi Arabia encouraging in schools, colleges, universities, the use of AI and that's going to continue to grow at an exponential pace.
Can I just add a couple of observations? So some of you will know I served as the Secretary of State for Education after the delivery of the vaccine program when I was vaccines minister. And we hosted the Saudi Arabian ministerial team here in the UK. I think Saudi has a huge opportunity. Why do I say that? Because it has a large young population. And the use of AI in education, you're beginning to see a real impact. One of the areas from primary, secondary, all the way through to higher and further education. Imagine a world where that population is upskilled, reskilled, at pace, because AI can deliver. If you think about the world today, every young person at school can have a personal tutor, right? We did the national tutoring program to get children to catch up because we locked them down and closed schools down, I think mistakenly, in our country during the pandemic. Tutoring in our country is the preserve of the wealthier families. In today's world, every child can have a tutor. And I'm certain that Saudi will embrace the technology, and therefore the advantage is they have this extraordinary population, which will drive growth, both economically and socially. And so I think actually the stars are aligning in an incredible way for the kingdom to develop its human capital, as well as, of course, its infrastructure and its natural resources.
I'm a sort of observer of Saudi Arabia over 30 years, and I reflect on Sheikh Salah's life. He was born in the 40s. If you look at Saudi Arabia in the 40s, when Sheikh Salah died in 2020, where Saudi Arabia had come in that period, in one lifetime, and if you see the fact that Sheikh Salah was a pioneer, was an early adopter of new things, I think that reflects Saudi Arabia. As we were writing this book, I think this is the history of Saudi Arabia, told through the story of one man. An innovator, an early adopter. And I think Saudi Arabia is a young country, early adopter, and I would expect it to be an early adopter of the economic benefits and the sort of benefits that would come from AI and harnessing it. So I would be quite optimistic about Saudi Arabia's embrace of the most modern technologies. It's clearly part of the vision. Indeed, as a country that's been short on labour and had to introduce it, AI is probably a big benefit for Saudi. I think it would be it kind of fits into the economic model. So without having any insight into this, it just something in my gut tells me that they'll do well.
I think we'll wrap up the Q&A there. I am conscious that there were about 15 more people who tried to catch my eye at various points or wave me down, which shows just how much we could discuss this further. What I would encourage you to do is two things. Firstly, take a copy of the book, read the book. It's got two wonderful co-authors in Pat Lancaster, who many of you will know from contributing to a range of national newspapers and regularly on television around the region, and Sir William as well, who was in the diplomatic service since the 70s and was ambassador to Sudan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Afghanistan. So you have two brilliant authors who are very well placed to write the book Once Upon a Time in Mecca. So that's the first recommendation I give you this evening if you want to find out more. The second recommendation, I actually have more than two, apologies. The second recommendation is that you read the ASI's report on Islamic finance. It is a very good and concise primer, I think, that really captures the opportunity for the UK and the city of London. My third recommendation is that if you spare the time, join us in the Holford room afterwards for a few more refreshments and to network with others here. And lastly, my final recommendation, I think it was a wonderful evening. Could you all please give a rousing round of applause for our speakers?